Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Liu Cixin. He's a Chinese science fiction author, and his dark forest theory and the ramifications of the dark forest theory created by Liu Cixin for Dungeons and Dragons analysis. All right, let's get into it. A lot to talk about here. All right, so let's define our terms. Okay, Louis Cixin and the dark forest theory. All right, so the dark forest theory is an absolutely brilliant theory brought forward by Liu Cixin. It has incredible value because it is a solution. It is a proposed solution to the Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox is the mathematical problem that exists for naturalists, right? So, I'm sorry, there's so many terms that have to be defined here. I appreciate your patience, right? I am a supernaturalist. I believe that there are things beyond the natural world that exist, right? And not only can they exist, but they can affect the real world, right? They can affect the natural world. That's a better way of saying it. All right. Many people are naturalists. They believe that they believe that there is nothing beyond the natural world. Okay, so I'm using term naturalist and supernaturalist. There are better terms and definitions for these, but they're much more complex, and they lose the simplicity and the elegance of naturalist, supernaturalist. There's a little bit of a simplicity for simplicity's sake here, but I'm a supernaturalist. Liu Cixin, there's a lot of evidence, in my opinion, that he is a naturalist. He is saying there is nothing beyond this natural world. Okay. Now, many people who study space, here's the Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox is the naturalist's mathematical problem of we know that the universe is absolutely vast. We know that there are at least millions of other planets that could sustain life. And yet, in thousands of years, we've never seen a single sign of a single living other civilization. That is a huge problem for naturalists. It's called the Fermi paradox. It's a mathematical problem. It's a problem for naturalists, right? It's actually not a problem for supernaturalists at all. I have my own, if you're a supernaturalist, you have your own theories on why the Fermi paradox is not a problem, okay? And we're going to set that aside today because we have a lot to talk about just on Liu Cixin's beliefs, right? Or actually what he's proposing and what he's putting forward, because it's really quite brilliant. All right. So the Fermi paradox is a huge problem. It needs to be explained, right? And what Liu Cixin has done is he has brought forward a very powerful solution to the Fermi paradox, a proposed solution for the Fermi paradox, which I think is absolutely brilliant and is the most valuable thing that Liu Cixin has ever put forward, in my opinion. All right. Now, what's interesting about and his proposed solution is the dark forest theory. Okay. Now, what is the dark forest theory? Okay. So, the meta of the dark forest theory is that Liu Cixin. To understand it, let me explain who Liu Cixin is. Liu Cixin is a Chinese science fiction author who wrote the Dark Forest trilogy. The Dark Forest trilogy contains the Three-Body Problem, Book 1, the Dark Forest, Book 2, and last, the Death's End, Book 3. It is a trilogy, right? It is a fiction. It is a science fiction series that is similar to the Dune series in that it is a ambitious, grand in scope science fiction tale that contains wisdom and intelligence, displayed intelligence, and incredibly good writing. All right, so that gives you an example of what the Dark Forest theory, the Dark Forest trilogy is. The most valuable thing in the Dark Forest trilogy is the Dark Forest theory, okay? Now I'm going to tell you what the Dark Forest theory is, okay? All right, here is the Dark Forest theory. I'm going to take you all the way through it, okay? Within the Dark Forest trilogy, this theory is presented from one character to another character within the Dark Forest trilogy. And here is the Dark Forest theory, and it is absolutely brilliant. And in my opinion, it is the best explanation it is the best proposed solution to the Fermi paradox I've ever seen. So let's do it. All right. First, you start with two axioms. The two axioms are every civilization. Okay. And these are like civilizations by the way, so I'm sorry this is taking so much to explain, but it is an incredibly complex story. It's not just me struggling to explain it. It is an incredibly complex story, okay? All right, so here's the thing. Specifically, the story within the Dark Forest trilogy is it's a first contact story. It's alien species meeting humanity. Multiple alien species meeting humanity. All right, Dark Forest theory. Every civilization that lives in the universe, their goal is to survive. Axiom 1. Axiom 2, resources are finite. Okay, all right, so those are set, all right? Now, here's the next one. When first contact is going to occur, okay, basically what will happen, what we have thought for a long time will happen, is that one civilization will reach out to another civilization and they will communicate with that civilization, right? But once you understand those first two axioms, it changes, and it says that actually first contact between two civilizations is most likely not to be communication, but it is to be an incredibly violent, swift destruction of one civilization of another civilization. And here's why. Excuse me. All right. One, if two civilizations within space are going to communicate, first there is a chain of suspicion. And the reason why is it is impossible for one civilization to know another civilization's true intentions, okay? Especially when you are meeting for the first time. So logically, you would try to dispel those suspicions through communication. However, there are so many obstacles to actually communicating between two species that don't understand each other's native languages, that what will eventually happen is that it is impossible for long distance communication to relieve the chain of suspicion, okay? And so what that means is if you can't relieve the chain of suspicion, then conflict is inevitable. All right. Now, if you grant everything that we've put forward for so far, every civilization wants to survive, resources are limited, conflict is inevitable because the chain of suspicion cannot be defeated through long distance communication. Okay? Then what that means is that the correct, pragmatic, logical first contact method is for one civilization to see another developing civilization, and the first way that those civilizations should interact is from a logical, pragmatic perspective, will act, that's a better way of putting it, will act from a logical, pragmatic perspective, is that the stronger civilization will do two things. It will destroy the developing civilization that is behind it in technology. It will destroy it utterly, and in addition to that, it will destroy it without giving away its own location. And the reason why, and that's the Dark Forest theory, and it's called that because when you understand all of this, it's like a hunter in a dark forest hunting a predator, right? In that they're not going to communicate with they're going to assume that the predator is dangerous and the predator is going to attack them and harm them. They will use their weapons then for the first interaction between those two creatures to be the hunter devastatingly killing the predator and not showing the hunter's location in case the hunter misses, it can strike again without its location being known. So this is an incredibly valuable theory, because the Fermi paradox is a real problem for naturalists, right? Their math is failing them. They're saying by math, we should already be talking to lots of aliens. So if we can't solve the Fermi paradox, it brings into question whether naturalism is really valuable and a valuable worldview, right? So the Fermi paradox is a massive problem for naturalists, right? Again, supernaturalists don't struggle with the Fermi paradox for a whole host of reasons, right? Which I'm not going to get into here. All right. Now, here's the issue, right? So one, I just want to say a few things about Leo Cixin. Leo Cixin, without a doubt, is an incredible author. He won the Hugo Award with the Three-Body Problem and overall with the Dark Forest trilogy. And I think that the Hugo Award is well deserved, right? And I have incredible respect for the Hugo list of novels, and I really feel that the Hugo Awards are incredibly valuable, and I think it was right to say the work that Leo Cixin has done is incredibly important and should be recognized for the Hugo Award. Now, here's the problem, okay? There is a problem with what Leo... Oh, and by the way, I also think Leo Cixin is an absolute genius. And the reason why is he did what nobody else did, right? He solved the Fermi paradox and gave a proposed solution that has defeated every other proposed solution. Now, I'm betting somebody in the comments is going to come along and say, "Oh, well, XYZ person, solved this way before Leo Cixin." Well, I'm going to say that doesn't matter. Who cares? And the reason why is if you develop something awesome and you bury it in your backyard, or you don't have the ability to show the world what you did, who gives a rat's about whatever you achieved, right? You can build the next statue, David statue, right? But if you put it in your garage and you never show it to anybody, or if you present it in a place that nobody ever sees it, then your work really doesn't matter, in my opinion, right? So I think Leo Cixin is important because I think he did solve the Fermi paradox, and I think and at minimum he put the solution in a place where people could see it, right? So I have incredible respect for Leo Cixin. However, the Dark Forest trilogy has a terrible problem at the root of the theory. It is a hopeless theory that that must be rejected outright, because the cost of believing and pursuing the theory, the logical implications of the theory, are so dark and foreboding and damaging and destructive and dangerous that the theory absolutely must be rejected whole cloth, right? Here's why, okay? So I last night I asked my daughter, Tal, this was in my brain, and I asked my daughter, I said, "Hey, do you got 10 minutes to talk about extraterrestrial life and first contact?" And she's like, "Yeah, I do." Right? So she sits down, but then my son was like, "I want to hear this." And then my wife sat down. So the four of us were discussing this, right? And when we were done, my high school daughter, who just entered high school, she's in the first year of high school, she says, "Hey, well, that means that the next time when we find a developing civilization, we should just destroy it," right? And I was like, yeah, like if you follow logically and pragmatically, if you're listening to what Leo Cixin is saying, yup, if we find life on Mars, we darn well better make sure we destroy it right quick, right? Like, and like that is too dark, right? It makes us monsters. This is my opinion, believing in Leo Cixin's accepting Leo Cixin's theory as correct and taking action on it makes the human race monstrous, right? All right, that's okay. That's my opinion. How does that connect to Dungeons and Dragons analysis? Here's how. All right, there are two theories, okay, that are bouncing around out there on Dungeons and Dragons analysis. Two overarching theories. And the overarching theories are two. Here's the first, and this is incredibly, incredibly prominent. You can find this virtually anywhere. You can't spin around and throw a rock on Twitter without hitting a Dungeons & Dragons analyst who is saying the following, saying that it doesn't matter how you play Dungeons & Dragons. All approaches to dungeon mastering and playing Dungeons & Dragons are equally valuable as long as everybody at the table is enjoying themselves or having fun. Those are synonymous terms, in my opinion, okay? This is an incredibly prominent opinion. An incredibly prominent opinion. In fact, and now I wholeheartedly 100% disagree with this opinion. And here's the second overarching approach to Dungeons & Dragons analysis. Dungeons & Dragons is an incredibly important game, and it is worth finding the best possible path, I would dare to say the right path to play Dungeons & Dragons. That there is a better path, in that we should pursue determining the better path and following the better path, okay? Now, I believe this, and I say it constantly, right? But I will tell you right now, I don't know anyone. I can't point to a single other person on YouTube who's saying the same thing. Saying, no, I'm going to point at that game and say the way they're playing Dungeons & Dragons is wrong, right? And even though everybody at the table is enjoying themselves, right? Now, here's why. I believe that the theory that all approaches to dungeon mastering and playing in Dungeons & Dragons are equally valuable as long as everyone at the table is enjoying themselves is a dark forest theory, right? It is a theory that has an incredibly high cost and that makes us monstrous. Here's what, and you're like, wait, what? Like, wait, why are you saying that, Scott? Here's why, okay? Dungeons & Dragons is an incredibly important, valuable game. I think it's even more than a game. I think it's an element of Americana, and I think it's a vector for art, okay? And what I'm saying is that everybody who plays Dungeons & Dragons, if they embrace my theory that there is a better path and that it is valuable to pursue and stay on the best possible path to playing the game, and that not all approaches that equal everyone at the table enjoying themselves is wrong, and that basically we should be doing something more than enjoying ourselves, right? So what I'm saying is, if you go with my approach, what can occur is that people themselves are elevated. People are challenged to read more and be more and change their interest in hobo murdering, right, at the table, right, not anywhere else, and that playing Dungeons & Dragons from the pursuit of a best path game, believing that there are approaches to playing the game that are better than simply the goal of everyone at the table enjoying themselves, right? That what can happen from that is that a person can be elevated. Their intellect can be elevated. Their creativity can be elevated. And their art can be elevated. And I'm specifically saying that the people who say as long as you're enjoying yourself, then your approach to Dungeons & Dragons is equally valuable is a monstrous, horrible theory that the cost of believing it is too high, right? And the reason why is they rob elevation from people who are positioned to be elevated. I have been elevated. I started being a dungeon master when I was 12 years old. I started as a dungeon master, not as a player, right? And the game has made me a better reader, a better person, a better man. It has challenged me at every step to say, don't just stop at everybody at your table enjoying themselves. Make yourself a better person. If you can, make your players better people, right? And to me, robbing people of elevation, saying, stop when you've had fun, is monstrous. It is a dark forest theory. It must be rejected whole cloth. It's my thought. I'm really curious what you think. Please consider liking and subscribing. Take care.